Welcome to the Kit Car History File series, where we'll be going through the industry's past. We'll be visiting old marks of long ago, some modern ones, some mostly older stuff. A lot of archive information with photographs and information on the cars they made, the people involved, and what happened to them.
Hi, welcome along to the Total Kit Car YouTube channel. My name's Steve Holt, editor of TKC Mag and TotalKitCar.com, and I'd like to warmly welcome you to another episode of the Total Kit Car History File series. I nearly forgot them. Just in case you're new here and actually you were looking for a video on how to build a brick wall in your garden. Yeah, we don't really do that here. But what we do is we look at the UK's at the time of writing in August 20. I'm stuck on that magazine hard copy paper writing keyboard. So forgive me, just humour me if I say writing and I don't notice. I actually mean photos and videos and such like. But in this instance anyway. So we look at the very best of the UK's kit car industry, which at the time of speaking in August 2024 is celebrating 75 years of existence since a wonderful chap and a real character called Derek Buckler inadvertently started our leisure hobby stroke industry in 1949. Rather than go through the spiel on that, if you search, we've got about 50 videos on the channel, I think, so far in this series. Maybe not quite that many, but there's certainly lots in the pipeline that have not yet been released. So we're getting there. We're barely scratching the surface thus far. So we've got a massive target to aim at, which I hope pleases our subscribers here. So Derek, he's covered in a video on Buckler Cars. Just search Total Kit Car Buckler Cars on your YouTube search thing, and hopefully that video will reveal itself, and you can find out all about the guy that is the father of our industry. But if you're an old hand round here, then again, welcome everyone. Really, come everyone. So you'll know what we do, and I do thank you, regardless whether you're new around here or a regular, for giving us another chunk of your day just to listen to our humble little videos. I would give you a kind of an indication on how long you'll be spending. The YouTube algorithm, what we get facts and figures and analytics through, and I don't understand most of it, to be quite truthful. But one I did recognise was that an optimum video length apparently is about half an hour. Now, I've never been a conformist, and I've always tried to buck trends and rebel here and there. So they are as long as they are, really, and as long as they need to be. I try not to go too much over 45 minutes, and we will do two-parters if we have to. But I always think that getting them in one part, one concise chunk, is better, maybe. But so we're trying no more than 45 minutes. We're trying around half an hour, but I think they fall somewhere in between normally. But if I don't get on with it, it'll go longer, won't it? But if you haven't already subscribed, please do so. I think about 77% of people that view these videos don't actually subscribe. So if we could just convert some of those, it will make our hard work a lot. It just make it worthwhile, really, and it won't cost you a penny, but we'll thank you and be forever grateful. And you never know, you might enjoy some of them. And certainly we're trying to, one of the reasons for doing this is we got a fantastic photographic archive. I'm blessed every time I look in those filing cabinets, and even though I'm an old hand, an old dinosaur, I still end up reaching in trying to find a particular photograph for a feature I might be doing, and end up half an hour later still thinking to myself, oh, what photo was it I came looking for, because I've been sidetracked and inevitably, because I say I've been in the game far too long, I suppose, nearly 40 years, but I've still got the enthusiasm of a 16-year-old, I think. So that's all that matters as far as I'm concerned. But inevitably, I'll remember some of the background to some of those photos, and I like that because it brings back fond memories mostly. Anyway, I am rambling, so I've got to get on. Otherwise, you'll only be on here for about 4 minutes 34. This episode, we're going to be looking at a company that divides opinion, I suppose. called Pilgrim Cars. We won't get involved in politics or shenanigans here. It's not what we do here. But we will cover the cars that they have produced, over the years. Certainly sold lots of kits, lots of cars, and much like Tim Dutton and Robin Hood, same but two companies, they have been responsible for putting people on the kit car building map. And when you're looking at numbers, which in Pilgrim's case, probably you're going to be looking at 7,000 kit sales. You've got to be. It makes them a notable player in the game, really. Founded by a guy called Den Tanner, who lots of people will know, the late Den Tanner, and a guy called Bill Harling. More on him shortly, because he wasn't around for that long, but he was a very important part, a cog in the fledgling Pilgrim wheel, shall we say. Den was always the driving force of the business. Got to say, actually, Pilgrim still exists in the same premises in Small Dole in West Sussex, and it's a very slick operation. It's a very nice, welcoming factory. They also, I think, most of their work is probably Ford Mustang related, because the proprietors are heavily into their American classics, particularly the Mustang. But I'm pretty certain, must confess, I haven't checked before recording this video, but I'm fairly, well, more than certain that you can still buy a Sumo Cobra replica and a Pilgrim Speedster. But again, just search them on the interweb, and you can make your own inquiries. But let's look at the history of the company. We like to wind it all the way back, because I'm told that people like the same sort of level of detail that I do, and I thought it was only me, so I'm quite pleased to hear that it's not. Just give a bit of background on Den's career, really. He studied at Brighton University, and he obtained a degree in electrical and electronic engineering, and I think he graduated in the early 80s. He then went to work for a company called Eurotherm, and they specialised in electronic temperature and systems controllers. And I think their claim to fame, if that's the right description, was they were responsible for making controllers for furnaces in which silicon chips were processed. Now, I know nothing about that industry. I don't profess to. I don't know whether Eurotherm still exists. I don't know whether that industry has moved on sufficiently, like lots of things have, which means they do things differently now. But they did certainly make those controllers for the furnaces. And if they don't, or if they still do, and I'm doing them a disservice, it's not intended. Anyway, Tanner then moved to Marconi Underwater Systems, and he worked on guided torpedoes, of all things. Then he moved to Plessey, where it got even better, because he was an electronics engineer on fly-by-wire missile systems. But having said that, during his spare time, he wanted to build himself a car, which became the Bulldog, which has to be said, was a game changer. We'll come to why that in my opinion, is the case very shortly. And he designed this little car. I think he might have started in 82, finished by 84, something like that 2 year period. And he needed a glass fibre laminator. And I haven't done this for a while, so let me slightly interject in case you are new around here. And again, I shouldn't assume that everybody knows what I'm talking about. I don't really know what I'm talking about most of the time, so I can't expect you to either. So just for the newbies and new arrivals, if you hear me use the word fiberglass, I shouldn't do that. I'll tell you why in a second. Glass fiber or GRP, it's all the same product, it's all the same material. GRP is glass reinforced plastic, which is what glass fiber is. Now, it's very easy and straightforward, and it's probably a nicer sounding word in my opinion to use fiberglass. Now, I try not to do that, because and that's in out of respect for the trademark holders of that word. So if I do, I don't mean to cause them any offence, but it slips off the tongue, fiberglass. But I do try, at least I try to use glass fiber. But please bear in mind, if you hear me say glass fiber, you hear me say GRP, it's one and the same thing. So then needed a glass fiber laminator, and he found a chap. Now this is really interesting. He searched nothing more more detailed than the Yellow Pages, his local Brighton area Yellow Pages. And he found a guy called Bill Harling. Now, Bill Harling is a very interesting character. I've not seen Bill for many, many years. A smashing fella. Now, I suppose to call Bill a glass fibre laminator is, I suppose, asking Rembrandt to paint your bathroom wall for you. Yeah, sure, he used paint, but he used it in a totally different and more skilled way than your average, due respect, painter and decorator. And again, I don't know if anyone listening, you could be a glass fibre laminator. You got my admiration. I'm not sure if you've tried to do it. It's easy to do. It's a bit like I say to people about painting a car. It's very easy to make a mess and daub a car with paint. It's very, very hard to make a glass fibre panel. There you go, and we're at it again. A GRP panel, and do it well. And glass fibre artisans are worth their weight in gold. They really are. And again, Bill actually, I think, would probably have described himself as a sculptor, but he just happened to use the medium of glass fibre. And so I think actually getting him to produce a car body was pretty easy for him, but it probably wasn't that challenging, given that I'd seen over the years, I've seen some of the statues that Bill has created. They are true works of art. As I say, I haven't seen or heard from Bill for many, many years. I hope he's okay, but lovely guy. Wasn't around at Pilgrim for very long, even though he ended up sort of co-founding Pilgrim GRP, as the company was initially called, with Den. And Pilgrim, how come people say, I've heard people ask why the name Pilgrim. The name came from nothing more complicated than the hymn to be a pilgrim. That was it. Simple as that. They were in the first play, and there's always and of course, I think Den and Bill were humming that hymn one morning, and they said, well, why don't we call the company Pilgrim? Bill was an artisan in GRP, so they used put the two together, Pilgrim GRP, and there you have the foundation of the company. As simple as that. Anyway, they were based in a little side street in Brighton, I think. I think it's a side street. Anyway, I think it's a residential street called Silwood Street. And they made about 50 of what became the Bulldog, right there. But the glass fibre smell, and indeed, I've heard this many, many times. If people set up a glass fibre company or making stuff from glass fibre, personally, I love the smell, but I can understand why people would not like the noxious smell. It's a joy when I go to a company that produces their own glass fibre. I just love it, I suppose. But there you go. And the neighbours complained. They complained to the gas board and said there was a leak, and kind of effectively precluded Den and Bill from producing any more bodies there. Incidentally, I found, talking about my archive, I found in the archive a beautiful letter written by young Den in the early 80s. I think it's about 1982. To my then publisher, a great chap, probably the best boss I ever worked for, called Terry Grimwood. And again, if you're listening to this, because I think actually he does keep an eye around on what's going in the industry. Hi Terry, hope you're well, mate. Anyway, he wrote. Dan wrote a letter to Terry, introducing his brand new car that he was designing and creating. And Terry gave him quite a blunt, and I remember Dan always remembered this, he gave him quite a blunt return. He wasn't rude to him, but he basically said, well, basically, best not give up your day job, mate. It needs a bit of refining. And I think, speaking to Terry in subsequent years about that, I think he admits that he was trying to be positive about it, but I think he's a bit like the guy that didn't sign the Beatles. It was, it's one of them. But Terry meant well, as he always did. But anyway, so they then moved to their first proper unit, and that was right on the seafront. Lady B, as in Buzzy B, Marina, next to the docks. I suppose, I'm not sure if it's Hove or Shoreham, but it's certainly on the sea, right on the seafront. and they had a nice and lovely little unit there before they moved inland to what is still the current base at Smaldole, which is quite near Henfield in West Sussex. But I think talking to Tanner about the Bulldog and its success, I think it was obviously priced correctly. At that time, there was lots of, this was a pre-SVA, IVA time, of course, wasn't even thought of, or even, inkling it was coming. I think, let's face it, companies like JBA, NG, Merlin, Marlin, the list went on, were producing traditional roadster style kits of a Morgan flavour, shall we say, in big numbers. NG sold lots of cars. Marlin must have sold over 3,000. I mean, we're talking big numbers for the kit car industry. But one thing I think Tanner had noticed was that they were relatively, I think an NG kit was a great value for money bit of kit, but it would need a serious investment, really. It wasn't a Dutton Milos sort of territory. £1,000 buys your kit. It was more expensive than that, and I'm not. That's no criticism for that. But Tanner realised or identified a fact that perhaps he could fill the void and do a Dutton, shall we say, and produce a traditional roadster kit that was probably, from memory, I think about £700, which was amazing value for money. Anyway, it was only based on nothing more exciting than initially a Morris Marina donor. As I said, that Mark 1 was the car that was produced before. It should have been called, I suppose, the gas leak special. Made 50 of those in Silwood Street. Then came the Mark 2, which had a revised grille and had introduced for the first time, I suppose, doors, although I prefer to call them little doorlets, really. And that was by public demand. People wanted doors. Mark 3 was purpose made for doors. I think the Mark 2, the mould had door apertures cut into it. Mark 3, new moulds, purpose made for larger doors. That was a good seller, the Mark 3. Then the Mark 4, which was based around Ford Cortina, took it mainstream at the time. Sales went up accordingly, dramatically so. And then there was a final and a more detailed styling revision came in relatively late in 1992, and that one had a stiffer chassis and a few other detailed changes, which it was a really good car by then. And again, I'd have no hesitation in calling the Bulldog a milestone. The amount of people, much like with Tim Dutton's kits, the amount of people that I have spoken to and still meet and speak to when they find out about kit cars that I'm involved with, I often hear the word Pilgrim Bulldog mentioned. It was one of those kits that put people on the ladder, much like Richard Stewart and, as I said, Tim Dutton was doing. So I think between about 85 and 1997, there could have been 2,000 Bulldog kits sold quite easily. He also, I think he then came along with, he could see what was happening with, we're going to go for, there was again, by public demand, I suppose, there was a 2+2 version of the Bulldog, although it had its own identity. And it was called the FT, which stood for nothing more than Family Tourer. And I think young Den had a family there. Den had a young family, Den and his wife, Jane, had a young family, and he found it difficult to get a carry cot and a toddler in the back of a Bulldog, quite simply, two-seater. So he set out to address that with a 2+2 seating configuration, get my teeth in. And also, while doing so, to improve on the original. I guess by the time that came out, we were on Mark III Bulldog, so it was a general improvement, really. It probably didn't sell as many, given that the Bulldog had sold, the numbers it sold. I would have thought, given the more practical nature of the FT, and it was a stylish look. It is a stylish looking car, would have sold more than the 250 it did so. And that was available 1989, I think as late as year 2000. I'm pretty certain that was that. But then, of course, we have another little car that again, there was 105 of them sold. Possibly didn't do as well because it was a real period-looking car. It just had a 50s special look about it, which isn't surprising because it is said to have originated from a Microplus Stiletto. It originally was going to be called the Rapier before a last minute change to Hawthorne, which I thought suited the car well. I've seen, I say, 105, only made between 86 and 87 for reasons we'll come quickly onto shortly. And a well-built one of those, you still see them, and they have a beautiful looking thing. Den was very taken with that, and he thought it would do better than it did. But as I said, we'll come on to the reason, one of the reasons why it didn't need to. And I say, very nice looking little car. Going back to the Bulldog, I seem to remember there was I worked for Kit Cars. You're going to say, oh God, here we go again. Worked for a magazine in the 80s, and there was a competition to name that car. And I think the Hawthorne was the competition winner in the end. So I don't know whatever happened to that particular Pilgrim Hawthorne. I think there was a build series in the magazine as well, so it remains to be seen. Then we come to the car that really, I suppose, if you didn't know the early sort of origins of the company, but you did know and you did hear about Pilgrim Cars later on, you'd know them for the Sumo, which was a Cobra replica. There is a story to that, and again, there's politics involved, and I don't really want to go into that here. Ask me at a show, perhaps, but that's as far as I'm going to go with that. But there was a reason for Den doing the Sumo, because he could pretty much see that at that time Cobra replica kits were going gangbusters, really, and everybody that produced them, with a couple of exceptions, was selling them in big numbers. And so therefore the Hawthorne did have a Cobra-ish look about it, I suppose, but he went the full hog, initially only producing 4 cylinders, again for the same reasons, I suppose, as his wish to make the Bulldog an affordable traditional roadster. I think he thought that there was a way to offer a 4-cylinder Cobra, because not everybody could afford perhaps a V8 engine, perhaps they couldn't afford side pipes, the sort of stuff that lots of people would want to see on a Cobra replica. And indeed, those things, you start adding chrome rollover bars, you start adding side pipes, you're going to be looking to the bottom line will rack up very quickly. So initially he only produced 4-cylinder versions, and that 4-cylinder was, well, that donor was the Ford Sierra primarily. One of the biggest selling Cobra replicas in UK history, right up there with Dax in terms of numbers. Now that Sumo name came from another Name That car competition in Kit Cars and Specials magazine, this time in 1987. Then launched the car. It didn't have a name, and a lady called, and I saw this the other day. I was doing some research in an old magazine, and I found it. A lady was called Angela Bromfield. So if you're listening to this, Angela, what happened to the car that you won? In fact, you won a Bulldog kit, I think, as a prize. I wonder if you ever built that car. And so that was the aim with the Sumo, to offer a budget Cobra replica, which no one had done. Ken Cook later did it very well. Classic with bright wheel, and then later classic replicas. I tell you, the bright wheel stroke classic replicas Viper, that is a very underrated car. Brilliant chassis on that car, and I've driven a couple of those that were customer built, and they were excellent. But back to the Sumo, the Libra, the Libra Cars Cobra was a good one from North Wales, Wrexham, built by a guy called Dave Jones. That was a nice car too. Another one that could be built around 4-cylinder mechanicals. But a much improved Mark II came along. Now that had a semi-monocoque structure. And then the Mark III, which was by far the biggest seller. Now that still had a Sierra donor, but that one came with the option of using full Granada, so you could use the V6, Essex or Cologne engine, and indeed Jaguar XJ6, much like everybody else that was producing a Cobra replica, was offering as a donor vehicle. So then you had the XK as an option, the brilliant Jaguar engine. But most people went for V8s. If they went for a Jaguar base one, in fact, I only know of a couple of Jaguar powered ones. Everybody seemed, if they built a Jaguar base Sumo, they went the V8 route, and lots of Rover V8 powered Sumos. And in later years, like everybody else, Chevy V8s became much more affordable and much more available in the UK, and that's the way people went. 1987 to date, really, and I'm sure that Paul at the current Pilgrim operation, Pilgrim Motorsports, they're called now. A very impressive facility. They're in the same facility, but it's undergone a real renovation, and it's a very, very, very nice building. It's very nicely decorated, a very welcoming atmosphere there. One half of it was doing the kit cars. As I say, I haven't spoken to Paul for quite a while, but the other half was looking after Ford Mustangs, either selling them and or maintaining them. Now there were some other notable Pilgrims as well. Or notable, yeah, not as notable. I mean, Bulldog and Sumo was where it's at for Pilgrim, really. But we mustn't forget the came along in 2002, the Pilgrim Speedster. That's an interesting model as well. Now, we don't want to get into politics, as I said earlier, but there was a time when Tanner departed the Pilgrim scene, and he's erstwhile workshop manager. We mentioned him here in a couple of these videos before. One of the best car builders of kit car builders that I knew. A guy called Tony Holmes was Pilgrim's workshop manager, supervisor. He took over the company for a while, several years actually, I think, before Tanner returned. Maybe in 2008, Tanner returned. Anyway, the Speedster was Tony's doing, really. And the company's agent, a Belgian chap, nice guy, lovely guy, the late, and I was sad to learn of his passing a couple of years back, Willy Lambrechts from LB Cars. And if you're in Belgium, or you know your Belgian geography, a place called Zandhoven. He was he sold lots of Sumos and Bulldogs primarily, but was also a bit of an air-cooled fanatic. He developed his own Speedster replica, and indeed he showed it at a show. There were a couple of shows late 90s at an equestrian centre in Braintree, and I think he launched it at one of those, the first one of those, which could possibly have been 1998 maybe. And so he was still agent for Pilgrim, and Tony Holmes, who took over in 2002, I think, he slightly revised the company name to Pilgrim Cars (Brackets UK Limited), and he took on that product as a Pilgrim Speedster. And I suspect by the time that Tanner returned in 2008, he might have sold 300 of those. That many, you see. And again, it was built on the Pilgrim philosophy of a cheap kit, and it undercut a Chesil with respect to Chesil, which is a great product, obviously, but not everybody. So Pilgrim thought, probably were right, not everybody could afford a Chesil, so they attempted to try and do something about it by offering a cheaper Speedster kit. And I've seen some beautiful ones. There was a guy, and I've forgotten his name, forgive me. He was based, he lived on I suppose it is on Hayling Island, in just off of Portsmouth there in Hampshire. And I went to see him one day. It's one of the nicest Speedster replicas I've ever seen, bar none. I mean, it was right up there, regardless of breed. It was one of the best Speedster replicas, full stop. Tony, I think it was Tony, developed a four-seater version, which, for the same reason that not every young family can't get in a two-seater, they want to take their youngsters with them when they go out and enjoy their leisure car. So it is that that he had some inquiries, I think, for a 4-seat speedster, and so he revised the chassis, added a subframe to get the required extra length to the floor pan, which gave him the ability to fit a second row of seats in. I think probably best described as a niche product. Possibly made 8 or sold 8. I'm not sure how many of those were built, but he possibly sold 8. Sweeping up the rest of the lesser known Pilgrims, there was a Pilgrim Martini in 1992. It was a full Capri based Mark II or Mark III body conversion that gave the donor Capri the look of an Aston Martin Vantage Volante. I guess a Capri as a donor these days is not a good idea, because I think I saw a bit of a Capri fan myself. I've owned about 6 of them over the years. I wish I'd have kept hold of just one of them, really. I think I saw 2.8 Brooklands model. I think it had been partly restored. It was 55 grand or something, and that's amazing. Just wish I'd have kept one of mine. But anyway, that was the donor, and I think they might have made 5, possibly between 1992 and 1994. Very low key. I remember the body buck sat in Pilgrim's yard for many, many years, much like it did with the MX2. This is an interesting one. It was a Lancia Stratos, Pilgrim's take on the Lancia Stratos, and again the idea, I think, was to make a cheap, affordable Stratos, which was a bit of a novel idea. At that time, they were making the bodies for the Allura, and the word I heard was that they were owed money for bodies they produced, and so they used the moulds and produced their own body. It was revised, being Tanner, it was revised, and the mould was revised to accept full Escort Mark III or Mark IV front-wheel drive components, which included hub, struts, brakes, and I do believe the 1600 CVH engine to boot, mid-mounted, with I think Cortina uprights at the front. They only produced a prototype, and again that body sat in Pilgrim's yard for many, or that buck sat in. Again, let's have a newbie rookie alert. If you hear on these videos the term buck or plug mentioned, we're not talking about the Bash Street Kids. We're not talking about a deer or anything like that with buck. We are talking about what is effectively the master mould. When you a mould has to be made, from which that mould come the bodies of the replica or the car, not replica, the car you're making or you wish to make. The body shell comes out of a mould, and the buck stroke plug, whatever master mould, that is just as it says, the master mould. So again, I'm trying to tip you off on stuff that I and people that know the industry will just take for granted. I'm just trying to just, make people aware of. I don't want it to be elitist. I don't want it to be pompous or anything like that. I just want to let people be informed and to have an idea on what we're talking about. So anyway, that was made, I think, 1989. Nothing came of it. I just think he did it as an exercise to show he could do it, really, I think. That's the Martini. We need to now talk about one more product, which I think it's a great car. Should have done better. We can probably, we can cover its history here, actually. I think we're just over half an hour, so we can just cover quickly the Haldane. Now, again, people who know the industry will be aware that the Haldane was a range of Austin Healey replicas, be they Healey 100 or Big Healey 3000, etc. Haldane originated from Scotland. Got an interesting story, actually. And it's a product that Dentana took over. But we will cover that, I think. First one was the Haldane HD100, which, as the name suggests, it gives you a clue as to what that model replicated. Very fascinating company. Haldane was a substantial group of companies that included John Haldane Limited, substantial group of companies in the Glasgow area that included Rover dealerships and a car rental business, I think, and also a Unipart parts centre. And they also, it was a big old operation. It also included vehicle distribution, international coach hire and travel. And Haldane wanted, I think it's Blantyre based actually, which I believe is, and forgive me for my lack of geography in Scotland, we have lots of Scottish friends and readers, and I don't wish to upset them at all, so forgive me. I think it's near Glasgow. Haldane wanted to come up with his own Healy. Two of his employees, Brian Harrison and Alastair Scott, were involved in creating what became the HD100. Then it was 100M replica actually. Box section chassis, Vauxhall Chevette running gear, and then they set about marketing it, replicas of that replica, shall we say. In fact, going back slightly, Haldane's business started as far back as 1961, so it was a well-established company. Harrison was based in East Kilbride. He was an engineer, boat builder, and I believe an aviator. I think he was a microlight designer and pilot. Whereas Scott was involved with wind turbines. I think he was an engineer. And I do recall, I think he was sort of bloke that had loads and loads of letters after his name. Very clever chap. And they actually took over the product completely in 1993. Moving away from Haldane. Retained the name though. Galvanised ladder frame chassis, semi-monocoque, close replica of the Healy 100. Had an extra body line as well as indicators, which I don't believe the original had. Suspension was Chevette with modified rear axle, just adapted so that it could accept fabricated upper and lower trailing arms. Now, two more quick words for you. Now, so forgive me if you're a regular, just forgive me. We need everybody to be on up to speed. Laminated. We use the word laminated in the kit car world. That means basically, or any world really, means fiberglass is laminated. You laminate fiberglass, and then you might hear the word fabricated. Fabricated means someone's produced, welded, whatever. Usually in association with in the kit car world, wishbones and trailing arms and such like, and hubs and such like. Maybe not hubs. But fabricated means, when I say fabricated upper and lower trailing arms, that means they're fabricated usually in-house. So there you go. And power came from a Ford Pinto 2 litre, incidentally. And I do believe that the Haldane was the interior and the dimensions were such that the original Healy trim off the shelf could be used on a Haldane replica, I believe. It was converted to run on Sierra as a donor, which probably attracted Tanner in 1993. That one, I don't know if Tanner actually took over that product or that project. He certainly never marketed any of those, but so I don't know. I think that one may have died or went to the in the sky kit car graveyard in the sky in about 1994 when the rest of the business moved south. Anyway, there was a Mark II version of the Haldane, I suppose you could call it that, in 1991, which had a stiffer and improved steel backbone semi-monocoque. And that was the time when the big Healy version was available. And that's the product. I've got a funny feeling that Haldane Developments, as they were called, might have gone into liquidation in 1994. They'd sold around 12 kits, I think. They probably made about as many as 100 of the HD 100, but they'd done about a dozen HD 300s, which was the big Healy 3000, before they went into liquidation, I think. And that's when Tanner at Pilgrim Cars picked up the mantle. Probably, and again, I think Tony Holmes, I talked to him about it one time. Pilgrim built some nice ones, and so did some of their customers. They built some really nice examples, and I think I might invent a new word. They pilgrimized it in as much as they made it affordable, more affordable. I think they made it easier to build. They amended their own molds, of course, because one thing that can't be sort of aimed at Pilgrim is the quality of the glass fibre, forgive me, first class. They had a guy called Martin, he might even still be there, and I can't remember his surname, forgive me, but Martin was one of the artisans, one of the craftsmen of glass fibre lamination in the UK. Absolutely fantastic. But I think they probably sold. I think Pilgrim probably did 24. That's all. Add that to the 12 that Haldane Developments had done, and that's quite a pitiful number, really, when you think that Sebring probably sold 10 times that of the various models they did. And I think a decent Haldane is right up there with a Sebring. It's equally as good a car. Obviously, I realise, and you need to realise that a kit car really is only as good as a person that's built it. But so anyway, that's where we're at with Pilgrim Cars history, or Pilgrim GRP history initially. Lots of kit cars sold over the years, really was, and some of those were very notable. So I hope you've enjoyed this episode. If you haven't, as I said, if you haven't subscribed, please, if you got this far, please consider doing so. But please, if you, at the very least, if you could hit that thumbs up like button, that would make my day. Yeah, there's no scientific, there's nothing clever about these videos. We're just using the photo archive that we've got. Some of these photos that you'll see here, or any of our videos, have never, let alone they might not have been seen for 40 odd years, but they certainly never, some of them have certainly never ever been seen, and I think that's quite sad, really. And without some of these cars that we're going to cover, without a photograph, excuse me, in our archive, there's no record of it ever existing. And I think that's quite sad, really. And as a person that's supported and promoted and been transfixed by the kit car industry in the UK for nearly 40 years, as I said, I think that's very sad. So we're going to do our best to wave the flag and promote a great British industry. Anyway, wherever you are in the world, today actually is probably, this is August, I think it's August the 12th, 2024. Weather has been, it's probably the 10th day of our really hot summer, really. It's been a very wet summer, but the days we've had that have been nice, some of them have been very, very hot. And I realise if I told you where I am in East Sussex in England, was about 26 degrees today. And if you're in an area where you're laughing and you're gasping for air at 40 degrees or 38 degrees, but to us Brits, 26 is pretty warm. It's been one of those days. But anyway, wherever you are in the world, thank you so much for visiting. I look forward to welcoming you next time. Have a great day, whatever you're doing. And thank you very, very much for your visit. Thank you.